What if I told you that 2025 was the year Hollywood learned nothing burns faster than money? Studios torched over $1 billion on catastrophic failures this year, and at least one bomb so catastrophic it could genuinely close the doors on a major player. From live-action remakes nobody asked for to CGI monkeys and superhero fatigue hitting critical mass, these aren't just flops. These are financial apocalypses. Which disaster costs the most? Which one threatens to kill an entire studio? Wolfman 2025. Lee Wannell walked into 2025 with swagger and walked out with a limp that Universal will feel for years. After The Invisible Man clawed its way to nearly $150 million on a shoestring $7 million budget, expectations were sky high for his Wolfman reboot. Instead, this werewolf limped into theaters with a catastrophic $10.6 million opening, plummeting a brutal 72% in its second weekend and crawling to a pathetic $35 million worldwide against a $25 million budget. That makes it one of Blumhouse's worst drops since Afraid, which is a feat considering Afraid was universally loathed. Wolfman stars Christopher Abbott as a father turning into a beast while trapped with his family, played by Julia Garner. The body horror was there, the pedigree was undeniable, but audiences gave it a C- cinema score, the kiss of death for any genre film hoping for longevity. Universal had bet that Wannell could resurrect their classic Monsters franchise after Dark Universe imploded spectacularly. Instead, they got a film that critics dismissed as formulaic and audiences outright rejected. The 53% Rotten Tomatoes score was generous compared to the audience reaction, which basically amounted to a collective yawn. Ryan Gosling was originally attached to star alongside director Derek Cianfrance, but when both departed, the project lost its heat. What stings most is that Universal thought it had another Invisible Man, a low-budget horror hit that would print money. Wolfman proved that horror audiences are fickle, that director pedigree means nothing without a compelling hook, and that the werewolf mythos might be too played out to resurrect. The film disappeared from multiplexes faster than its protagonist transformed on screen, and Universal quietly shelved plans for additional monster reboots. Opus 2025. A24 swung for the fences with Opus and missed so spectacularly that it became one of the 10 worst wide-release openings in box office history. The film debuted to just $1 million from 1,164 theaters, finishing 12th during one of the slowest weekends in recent memory. It stars Ayo Edebiri, fresh off her Emmy-winning turn in The Bear, alongside John Malkovich as Alfred Moretti, a reclusive pop star who invites journalists to a desert compound for a twisted listening party. The premise screams, Midsummer meets The Menu, and critics like it well enough, giving it a 40% Rotten Tomatoes score, but audiences were baffled by its surrealist execution. Against a modest $10 million budget, Opus still couldn't recover even a fifth of its cost theatrically, ultimately limping to just $2.2 million worldwide. Director Mark Anthony Green made his feature debut here, and while his ambition is admirable, the result is a messy cult thriller that couldn't decide if it wanted to satirize celebrity worship or embrace full-blown horror. Nile Rodgers composed original music for the film, and Malkovich clearly enjoyed chewing scenery as a pop idol turned cult leader. But none of that mattered. The film premiered at Sundance in January with lukewarm buzz, and A24 dumped it into theaters 2 months later with minimal marketing. The timing was disastrous. It opened against multiple other prestige films in a weekend where everything underperformed. Audiences who did see Opus found it visually striking, but narratively incoherent, with one sequence after another piling on provocation without payoff. The 58% audience score on Rotten Tomatoes is slightly more forgiving than the critical reception, but it doesn't change the math. A24 lost millions on a film that should have been a cult classic, but instead became a cautionary tale about style over substance. Opus eventually found a second life on HBO Max, climbing to third place on the streaming charts, But that doesn't erase the theatrical humiliation. The Alto Knights, 2025. Two Robert De Niro's should be twice the box office draw, right? Wrong. Warner Bros. Learned that lesson the hard way when the Alto Knights crashed with a humiliating $3.1 million opening, finishing 6th place during a disastrous March weekend. Directed by Barry Levinson and written by Goodfellas scribe Nicholas Pileggi, the film follows Frank Costello and Vito Genovese, two childhood friends who became rival mob bosses. De Niro plays both roles, using prosthetics and makeup to differentiate the characters, which critics immediately flagged as a distracting gimmick. The Washington Post called it supremely distracting, while The New Yorker dismissed it as an odd gimmick that undermined the story. The film carried a bloated $45 to $50 million budget, greenlit personally by Warner Bros. Discovery CEO David Zaslav, who apparently believed mob movies still printed money like they did in the 90s. They don't. The Alto Knights ended its theatrical run with just $9.6 million worldwide, losing Warner Bros. An estimated $110 million when combined with Mickey 17. The gangster genre has been on life support for years. Even Martin Scorsese struggled with Killers of the Flower Moon, which underperformed against a $200 million budget despite Oscar buzz and Leonardo DiCaprio alongside De Niro. The Alto Knights had none of that prestige and all of the bloat. Levinson hasn't had a significant theatrical hit since Wag the Dog in 1997, and this proved he no longer has the pulse of modern audiences. Critics panned the film for being longer than it needed to be, with tedious dialogue scenes that went nowhere and a subplot involving a local club that should have been cut entirely. De Niro gave a solid performance as the glowering Costello, but audiences didn't care. The movie looked like a relic from another era, and in 2025, nostalgia for mob films has officially died. Warner Bros. Gave the film a proper theatrical rollout in over 2,600 locations, spending millions on marketing, and got nothing in return. The Alto Knights will be remembered as a vanity project that should never have been greenlit. Better Man, 2025. If turning Robbie Williams into a CGI chimpanzee sounds like a terrible idea, that's because it was. Paramount Pictures spent $110 million producing Better Man, then dropped another $25 million to acquire North American distribution rights, banking on the musical biopic becoming a breakout hit. Instead, it opened to a pathetic $1.05 million in the United States from 1,291 locations, landing in 14th place and becoming the first official box office bomb of 2025. Directed by Michael Gracie of The Greatest Showman fame, the film depicts Williams as an anthropomorphic chimp because the singer views himself as a performing monkey. It's bold, creative, and utterly alienating to audiences who have no idea who Robbie Williams even is. In the UK, where Williams is a legitimate superstar, the film still faltered, opening to just $1.9 million. Worldwide, Better Man has earned a dismal $11 million to date. Critics loved it, awarding it an 88% Rotten Tomatoes score, with many praising the audacity of the concept and the emotional depth of the storytelling. Audiences who saw it also responded positively, giving it a 94% audience score. The problem? Nobody saw it. Williams is virtually unknown in America, where his biggest hits like Angels and Millennium barely cracked the top 50 on the Billboard Hot 100. His highest charting album, Escapology, peaked at number 43. The CGI monkey gimmick confused American audiences who were already skeptical about a biopic for a musician they didn't recognize. Paramount tried everything, including an appearance by Williams on Dick Clark's New Year's Rockin' Eve, but nothing moved the needle. The film's technical achievements are impressive, with the CGI seamlessly blending Williams into scenes alongside human actors. But that innovation came at a cost. A $110 million budget for a musical biopic is insanity, especially for an artist with limited American appeal. Industry analysts noted that $25 to $30 million would have been more reasonable. Better Man will likely find a cult audience on streaming, where curious viewers can watch from home without risking ticket prices. but theatrically, it's one of the most spectacular failures in recent memory. Tron Aries, 2025. Jared Leto's box office curse struck again with Tron Aries, Disney's massively expensive sequel that bombed harder than anyone predicted. The film cost over $200 million to produce, not including marketing, and limped to just $142.2 million worldwide. That's only 35% of what Tron Legacy grossed back in 2010, and that film itself underperformed expectations. Disney greenlit Aries banking on nostalgia for the neon-soaked digital world of the grid, but audiences had moved on. Leto stars as Aries, a program who escapes into the real world, and while the visuals are undeniably stunning, the story is convoluted and lifeless. Critics were split, with some praising the ambition, while others dismissed it as a soulless cash grab. The 15-year gap between Legacy and Aries killed any momentum the franchise had. Fans who loved the original films in 2010 were older now, with families and less disposable income for risky theatrical outings. Younger audiences had no nostalgia for Tron, and Leto's terrible track record in blockbusters, from Morbius to Suicide Squad, made him box office poison. The film opened to $73.2 million domestically and earned another $69 million overseas, numbers that would be respectable for a mid-budget film, but catastrophic for a $200 million-plus production. Disney reportedly needed Tron Aries to gross at least $500 million to break even. It didn't come close. The failure stings because Disney had high hopes for a new Tron franchise, with plans for sequels and Disney Plus spin-offs all hinging on Aries succeeding. Those plans are now scrapped. The film disappeared from theaters within weeks, overshadowed by bigger releases and negative word of mouth. Leto's involvement became a punchline, with social media mocking his inability to open a movie. Tron Aries joins a growing list of Disney flops in 2025, a year where the Mouse House learned that brand recognition alone isn't enough. Audiences want compelling stories, not expensive nostalgia trips that feel hollow. Aries is a cautionary tale about greenlighting sequels nobody asked for. Thunderbolts, 2025. Marvel's identity crisis reached its breaking point with Thunderbolts, a film that had everything going for it and still flopped spectacularly. The movie stars Florence Pugh, Sebastian Stan, David Harbour, and Julia Louis-Dreyfus as a team of reformed villains assembled to save the world. It earned an impressive 88% Rotten Tomatoes score, making it one of the highest-rated MCU films in years. Critics praised its standalone charm, witty dialogue, and refreshing lack of multiverse nonsense. Audiences awarded it an 80% verified score. And yet, it bombed. Thunderbolts cost $180 million to produce and another $100 million to market, requiring at least $425 million worldwide to break even. It earned just $382 million globally, making it the fifth lowest-grossing Marvel Studios film ever. The results are worse than the Marvels, which at least had the excuse of being actively hated. Thunderbolts proved that making a good Marvel movie doesn't guarantee box office success anymore. The MCU is exhausted. Audiences are burned out after years of mediocre Disney Plus shows, convoluted multiverse plots, and sequels that demand homework to understand. Thunderbolts released in May, traditionally Marvel's most profitable slot, and still couldn't crack $400 million. The film's marketing campaign was clever, positioning it as a fresh entry without baggage, but that messaging backfired. Casual audiences assumed it was skippable, while die-hard fans were skeptical of yet another team-up film. The cast is talented, but none of them are A-list draws capable of opening a blockbuster solo. Hugh is beloved but not a movie star yet, and Stan's Bucky is a supporting character elevated to lead without earning it. Disney and Marvel scrambled to understand what went wrong. The film was released day and date in most international markets, but overseas audiences shrugged it off. China, once Marvel's golden goose, contributed less than $30 million. Thunderbolts represents a turning point for the MCU, proof that the brand alone can no longer guarantee success. The failure puts immense pressure on upcoming releases like the Fantastic Four: First Steps and Avengers: Doomsday, both of which need to deliver or risk further erosion of audience trust. Marvel's dominance is over, and Thunderbolts is the coffin nail. Elio, 2025. Pixar's reputation as animation's gold standard shattered with Elio, a catastrophic failure that posted the studio's worst opening weekend in 30 years. The sci-fi adventure about an 11-year-old boy, mistaken for Earth's intergalactic ambassador, earned just $21 million domestically and $35 million globally in its debut, against a reported budget of $150 million, with some sources claiming it ballooned to over $250 million after delays and reshoots. Elio is a financial disaster. The film was originally scheduled for March 2024, but got pushed back over a year, killing any momentum from the marketing campaign. By the time it released in June 2025, audiences had moved on. Elio opened against stiff competition from How to Train Your Dragon and Lilo and Stitch, both live-action remakes that targeted the same family demographic. Parents chose the familiar over the original, and Elio paid the price. The film received strong reviews, earning an 84% critic score and 91% audience score on Rotten Tomatoes, with an A Cinema score indicating those who saw it loved it. Nobody saw it. Pixar's previous low was Elemental in 2023, which opened to $29.5 million before finding legs and climbing to nearly $500 million globally. Disney is hoping Elio follows that trajectory, but early signs are grim. The film dropped steeply in its second weekend, and international markets showed little interest. Analysts estimate Elio needs at least $375 to $400 million worldwide to break even, a number it has no hope of reaching. The failure highlights Pixar's ongoing struggle with original content. Inside Out 2 was a massive hit last year, but it was a sequel. Pixar hasn't successfully launched a new franchise in years, with Luca and Turning Red both dumped onto Disney Plus during the pandemic. Elio was supposed to prove Pixar could still create magic with original stories. Instead, it proved audiences only care about established IP. The film's title didn't help. Elio sounds too similar to Luca, confusing casual audiences who assumed it was a sequel. The marketing focused on the alien designs rather than the emotional core, making it look like a generic kids' movie instead of the heartfelt adventure Pixar is known for. The box office failure of Elio raises existential questions about Pixar's future. Can the studio survive if audiences only show up for sequels? Mickey 17, 2025. Bong Joon-ho returned to Hollywood after winning Best Picture for Parasite and promptly delivered one of 2025's most spectacular failures. Mickey 17, a sci-fi thriller starring Robert Pattinson as a disposable clone sent on a dangerous space mission, cost $118 million to produce and was projected to lose Warner Bros. Up to $80 million. The film earned just $111.2 million worldwide, a catastrophic result for a director of Bong's caliber. The $41.4 million domestic total is especially embarrassing, falling short of Parasite's North American haul despite a much bigger budget and a major movie star. Mickey 17 was greenlit by Warner Bros. Under previous leadership, and the new regime inherited a project they had no faith in. The film suffered from multiple release delays, originally scheduled for March 2024 before getting pushed to January 2025. The marketing was confusing, with trailers emphasizing Pattinson's multiple clone characters, but failing to convey the story's dark humor or emotional stakes. Audiences were baffled by the concept, and critics were split. The film holds a 68% Rotten Tomatoes score, with some praising Bong's visual inventiveness, while others found it cold and overly complicated. The problem is twofold. First, Pattinson is not an A-list movie star. He's a talented actor beloved by cinephiles, but he doesn't open movies. His biggest hits, The Batman and Twilight, succeeded because of their franchises, not his name. Second, audiences don't care about original sci-fi anymore unless it's from James Cameron or tied to a major IP. Films like John Carter, Battleship, and now Mickey 17 prove that expensive space operas without brand recognition are box office poison. Warner Brothers spent months trying to salvage Mickey 17, conducting reshoots and tweaking the edit. But nothing worked. The film opened to empty theaters and disappeared within weeks. International markets, usually a safety net for underperforming Hollywood films, rejected it outright. China contributed less than $15 million. The failure of Mickey 17 is a devastating blow to Warner Bros., which has endured a brutal 2025 with the Alto Knights and other flops draining resources. Combined losses from Mickey 17 and the Alto Knights exceed $150 million, putting the studio under intense pressure heading into 2026. Bong Joon-ho's reputation remains intact, but Mickey 17 proves even Oscar-winning directors aren't immune to catastrophic box office failures. Snow White, 2025. The single most catastrophic box office disaster of 2025, and possibly the decade, is Disney's live-action Snow White remake. This train wreck cost an estimated $270 million to produce after extensive reshoots, delays, and CGI rewrites, and earned just $205 million worldwide. Disney needed at least $500 million to break even. Instead, they lost an estimated $295 million, making Snow White the biggest financial failure of the year by a staggering margin. Controversy started years before release when Rachel Zegler, cast as Snow White, made comments criticizing the original 1937 film, calling its outdated portrayal of women problematic. Her remarks ignited a firestorm, with conservative audiences vowing to boycott the film. Then came the dwarfs debacle. After Peter Dinklage publicly criticized Disney's plan to cast actors with dwarfism, the studio panicked and replaced the seven dwarfs with CGI creations. The decision backfired spectacularly, with the CGI dwarfs looking uncanny and lifeless in trailers. Audiences mocked them relentlessly online. Gal Gadot, cast as the evil queen, became another lightning rod when her vocal support for Israel during the Gaza conflict alienated progressive audiences. The film was caught in a cultural crossfire, hated by the right for Ziegler's comments and hated by the left for Gadot's politics. Director Mark Webb, best known for the Amazing Spider-Man films, couldn't save the project. Production was plagued by COVID delays, a set fire, and expensive reshoots that rewrote the ending and removed entire subplots. The budget ballooned from an initial $180 million to over $270 million, and the final product felt like a Frankenstein edit with tonal inconsistencies and jarring pacing. Critics savaged Snow White, awarding it a dismal 30% Rotten Tomatoes score. Audiences were even harsher, giving it a historic 2.2 IMDb rating and walking out of theaters in droves. The film opened to $42 million domestically, a soft start that cratered quickly. By its second weekend, ticket sales collapsed. International markets rejected it outright, with China contributing less than $10 million. Snow White represents everything wrong with Disney's live-action remake strategy. Nobody asked for this movie. The original is a timeless classic that didn't need updating. The casting controversies alienated huge swaths of potential audiences before the film even released. The CGI dwarfs looked terrible and highlighted Disney's cowardice in caving to bad faith criticism instead of standing by their creative choices. The budget was obscene, bloated by reshoots and executive meddling. And the final product was creatively bankrupt, a soulless retread that brought nothing new to the table. Snow White's failure threatens Disney's entire live-action remake pipeline. Future projects like Moana and Lilo and Stitch succeeded because they embraced their source material. Snow White tried to distance itself from the original and paid the ultimate price. The $295 million loss is a gut punch for Disney, which is already facing pressure from activist investors over declining creative output. This disaster might finally force the studio to rethink its strategy. So there you have it, the absolute worst box office catastrophes of 2025. From CGI monkeys to superhero fatigue to live-action remakes that nobody wanted, Hollywood torched over $1 billion this year chasing trends instead of telling great stories. Snow White's $295 million loss is the kind of failure that ends careers and reshapes studios. Which bomb shocked you the most? Did Marvel deserve to fail this hard, or are audiences just burned out? And honestly, Will Disney ever learn to stop remaking classics nobody asked for? Drop your thoughts in the comments and tell me this. If you could greenlight one of these movies over again with unlimited budget and total creative control, which disaster would you fix and how?